When you cop a new video game, whether it's story-based, shooter, fighting, or whatever, and you played it long enough, you're like, wow, that game was trash, or that game was actually so good. Did you ever sit and think for a moment throughout your experience of playing it, these vids are trash? Was the fashion of the characters involved, its surrounding world, or the overall tone of the game as a fashion aesthetic of any sort of relevance to you? And you might be like, why the would I ever buy a game just because the characters were like dripped out? I bought it because, well, for whatever other reason. And it's true, games don't usually serve as the pioneer of the fashion industry or predict the next trend cycle. There may not seem any correlation between the two, based on multiple factors like the difference in consumers or content. Really, they're just two contrasting vast industries that, in its most general sense, wouldn't hold hands in any type of way. But really, if you think about it, everything is fashion. I say that in the end, clothes are what unite us all. Like truly, clothes are a fundamental aspect of any type of context, idea, establishment, literally the world, our society, and everything it had, bro. That's like how deep rooted fashion can be. Going back to games, well, obviously, as a digital art form, it can use fashion as an outlet in order to push out or convey a more compelling story or push out a certain narrative, especially when it's time to push out the consumer and immerse them into a world that's completely different from our reality. The clothes within play a crucial role in fully realizing the idea and making said world or environment into a fully constructed reality. I mean, we're talking about a digital art form where usually it serves as a purpose to maybe, I guess, distract its consumer from their own reality by pulling them somewhere else where they might enjoy it slightly more. Games are storytellers, and with a made up story, it sort of has this obligation to convince its viewer of its credibility and make the fully realized group of ideas into one single art form, a video game. Fashion, in the end, does integrate itself heavily into any type of story, into any type of context. It can be the main focal point as it is in dress up games where the practice of literally constructing a fit is all you do. It's literally fashion in its most superficial state. Or it isn't necessarily something that's pointed out, but it's a key factor in the process of giving life to its environment or story, world building. But fashion, as it fills up all these roles within storytelling, it may also serve as a way of perpetuating certain agendas in order to ease its way into a certain demographic of people, specifically men and the male gaze. Hello, I'm Ani. By now, the term male gaze has been ran through up and down, sideways, given so many definitions and examples, and most of all, watered down to what we know the term of to be today. Nowadays, it's a concept almost applied to every context in which women are portrayed by the media in a slightly more alluring, feminine, or seductive type of way. Like with the TikToks of dressing up for the male gaze versus the female gaze, doing my makeup for the male gaze versus the female gaze. It has gotten so mainstream, I would say, in a way that the term's first public mention and its original meaning seem almost tainted by what is now known as the male gaze. For context, the term's first ever mention came from British feminist film theorist Laura Mulvey in her 1973 essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. In her essay, she explains how the cinema of the time objectified women and portrayed the female image through a heterosexual male lens or gaze as a passive, non-factor, secondary character to the male active counterparts. Mulvey writes in her essay, in a world ordered by sexual imbalance, pleasure has been split between active such male and passive such female. The determining male gaze projects its fantasy onto the female figure, which is styled accordingly. Initially, the term's focus surrounded itself more so on the concept of the female's active role in pieces of media, what the purpose for inclusion was, and how it affected the overall story. She explains how women were not really doing nothing for real and instead just served as a way of being doormats for the male counterparts to step on. And said role is birthed by men's suppressed fantasies of possessing an almost powerless, static, and passive woman for their own pleasures. This idea also goes in hand with the everlasting concept of the submissive and delicate woman, and how the stereotype has been indoctrinated into the media as a way of neglecting the female potential of being the starring role in any type of context. So, really, was the concept of the male gaze ever about the clothes? Well, in part, yes. Mulvey mentions in her essay, in their traditional exhibitionist role, women are simultaneously looked at and displayed, with their appearance coded for strong visual and erotic impact, so that they can be said to connote to be looked at-ness. As women serve as placeholders for men's desires, the way they're styled and especially portrayed as really drives the male gaze phenomenon home. Their sensual eroticness is not for the purpose of empowerment or highlighting their independent beauty. Instead, it's a forced sexualization in order to appeal to their male viewers. So yeah, fashion does go hand in hand, but where am I going with all of this? I want to talk about a specific type of phenomenon I've noticed, specifically within video games and industry, that has commonly reeked of sexualized female characters and the male agenda. How is the male gaze applied to this art form within its character design practices, and what are some valid examples of it happening? Okay, so I'll divide the topic of objectification of female characters in video games within two subgenres: objectification based on male appeal and objectification based on story narrative. While both have negative implications on their characterization and the impact of their inclusion, one is like the root of all evil, and well, the other one, well, not so much, I guess. And I asked myself, how can we know when a female character is being affected by the male gaze in the first place? It isn't just about the clothes, it's about the context, the why they're designed the way they're designed. Does it add onto the story, the overall character arc? Oh, no? She's been objectified for the male appeal. Sadly, this is the most common form of objectification of female characters within multiple video game genres. Designs based solely on how marketable they are address their target demographic, well, men, and how profitable the exploitation of the content can be. Here is where we see the usage of fashion in its most superficial state, when there's no meaning, no thought deeper than the first layers of fabric. Well, in most cases, they're not wearing barely any fabric at all, honestly. What's just sexy? What's just cute? And what can I fit into this narrative to make it cohesive but sexualized enough so that I can appeal towards the male consumer? Here we can see the common use of the most obvious scandalous clothing pieces: bikinis, miniskirts, tights, heels, when they will literally be so unconventional to use in their story context. A lot of cleavage, and honestly, just the least amount of clothes that they can get away with. We can commonly see this effect in fighting games, where women who should have appropriate attire to execute a martial arts practice, they're instead wearing a counterfeit version of what they maybe should be wearing. And in some cases, this isn't necessarily something that's a bad thing. Creative liberty in order to give characterization and meaning to a character through their clothing is necessary. The problem comes when there's no justification for it, other than the ill intent of just appealing towards the male gaze. Why are there multiple fighting games and spin-offs solely based around the idea of women and femininity? And one would want to think it's wow in order to contribute towards empowering a female demographic and change the narrative. But really, it's truly all about the appeal, the fan service. This is why in a lot of games we don't see game designers take huge risks for their female clothing. It's to keep them in the same objectified box of how women should only look a certain type of way, the men's definition of feminine. While their male counterpart designs take inspiration from multiple outsourced inspirations and fully go with any type of creative idea all the way through, female characters are chained to this prison to serve one purpose only: being objectified for the male appeal. And while it may seem like another phase of the same coin, the concept of justification based on story narrative is instead with a purpose relevant to the female character's story, journey, and circumstances within their own narrative. So we talked about serving for the male gaze with no substantial justification other than the fact of appealing towards consumers, but can a female character's objectification through her clothing ever be justified? This concept occurs when the design is based surrounding the character's narrative circumstances, how it affects, adds onto, and says about them. It matters in the overall story. It helps drive an idea, clarify a plotline, immerse the viewer into the world, or empathize and feel for the character being portrayed. It can also be ironic. It's the storyteller's way of playing into their own stereotypes and like making a mockery of them, and the clothes add on to this idea. We can see an example of this in the character of Juliet Starling, from the game originally called Lollipop Chainsaw. Juliet wears a very stereotypical cheerleading uniform as at it, but she literally is a cheerleader. She wears a cropped tank top with her school's sports team printed in front, a purple-ish miniskirt with a red belt, white tights with the same team printed on, with matching red leg warmers, and just some white and red sneakers. What she wears is literally the epitome of her character, while on the surface it's also playing into this like dumb blonde shell stereotype that was she's like at first, being portrayed as. But really, when you actually get to play the game and the storyline, she's so much more. Yet she's still herself. Her choice of clothing is for a reason within the narrative, separating itself from the response it might receive out of the immersion of the story. Yet her objectification within the game is very blatant, especially in other public chainsaw and
In my memory, have Juliet do plenty of cartwheels while wearing those little white panties with the teddy bears.
And the costume choices add on to this concept with very questionable options. And other characters within the game actively objectify Juliet. The objectification is made present within the story narrative. And it's the writer's way of, in this case and in many other cases, of acknowledging the repercussions, reactions, and negative effects being subjected to the male gaze have. Actually integrating it into the narrative breaks the fantasy. It's a conversation to be had. It's something to be brought up. It's uncomfortable. The female character isn't immune to it anymore. Instead, it shapes how her writing should be, how she acts, expresses, and her overall integration into the story. And I know Julie's case isn't the most like the best example of this happening, as her objectification in the game is treated more so as like comedic relief. But I can't think of a better example of this happening. The video game Catherine, or also known by its remake Catherine's Full Body, is an experience being literally played through the eyes of the male gaze, specifically in the original game. You play as this guy named Vincent, and basically the whole premise of the game is that he's torn up between these two baddies: his longtime girlfriend Catherine with a K and this new girl he meets, Catherine with a Z. The story explores themes of commitment, relationships, and fidelity, while also highlighting the relatable experience of having to grow up into a responsible and present member of society, the act of settling down and living behind a life of maturity and soul independence. Though what I really want to focus on is the characterization of the Catherines and how they fit into the narrative. First, Catherine with a K is Vincent's long term girlfriend. She represents maturity, responsibility, and dominance. And we can see these aspects of her highlighted throughout her clothing, as Catherine wears a more conservative attire, combining a sense of formal wear, city hybrid, and office siren look. She uses a black turtleneck button up style top, with a turquoise lining detail from the bottom of her chest to her waist, almost making the figure of a corset silhouette, matched with white-legged black trousers, basic black pumps for her footwear, and black tights to cover the front part of her foot. For accessories, most notably she wears a silver medal with a turquoise detailing waist chain and black office siren-esque glasses. Her fashion literally directly correlates to what she represents in the story. Catherine's story comes with heavy baggage, with topics like marriage and kids, topics that literally scare Vincent, the male protagonist, into looking for an escape, a distraction. This is when Catherine with a C comes in, and she represents the complete opposite of what we just talked about. While the male protagonist tries to hold on to the very little freedom he has left before having to seclude himself to a life of confinement, he conveniently meets Catherine with a C at a bar. And she's exactly what Vincent was looking for: a girl that represents a free soul, seductiveness, and with a no strings attached mentality. And again, her role is further proved with her fashion choice, as she wears a more provocative and playful outfit compared to her counterpart, Catherine with a K. Her attire includes a white sleeveless strap corset with her white lace bra peeking from underneath. She matches with a white button-up mini pencil skirt and white platform strap heels. As accessories, she wears again a white lace choker around her neck and white transparent lace tights up to her upper thighs, and what ties the whole look together is a bright red bow around her waist, in a way labeling her as like the present that the main protagonist needs, I guess. Video games and its fashion choices are honestly very intentional, and obviously you would think that because there's a whole group of designers and professionals, like working on this, in order to make this one piece, this one product. I feel like recently I've come to like appreciate and actually take in way more how this art form can use its freedom in terms of clothing in order to convey a message, a narrative, and even an agenda. I love it, bro, when you can truly appreciate the art being portrayed in front of you and how like meticulously and carefully curated it is in order to convey a certain message and its storytelling. And it's honestly sad how such a creatively liberating industry can be tainted, but honestly, this vile artists who are still trying to cater to this agenda, just to the sole outlet of objectification of their female characters, just to get that engagement that they so badly need. And again, obviously, I'm aware that there's, an audience for everything, and I guess the content can't be fundamentally wrong. I guess my job was just kind of like highlight and talk about the different aspects of it, and just simply put it out there. Just it's just a topic for discussion, really. I wanted to highlight the effects, consequences, and issues it has on the narrative. Analyze the different cases, talk about what's so common, where we see in the first place, and obviously, where does it even come from? Will we ever escape the male gaze? Well, no, maybe. How do we completely alter our society's viewpoint on women when it has been so indoctrinated for so long and through time developed more and more? It has gotten better, I would say. Staying on topic, but video games specifically, I can see how like games are being, more progressive over time, catering towards different demographics. Obviously, there's things for everyone. The last 10 years, I would say they have gotten progressively better in portraying female characters in actual active roles, more diverse roles. But like clockwork, as this happens, the backlash gets even louder from the right wing Twitter. And so that as they're quick to label any type of product that's not catered to their objectified fantasy of women as this new product of the new woke feminist agenda movement or whatever. And how this is why we shouldn't have women in charge of developing games. In the end, bro, just enjoy the games you like. Like, that's all you need to do, really. Play dress up games, customize your character, focus just solely on the drip your character has. Even more than the actual story, like, who cares? That's all that I have for today. I'm Ani, the Island Doll. See you.